world of healthcare and life sciences has changed forever. With an explosion of data, increased focus on patient outcomes, and the need for real-time insights, healthcare and life sciences organizations are under increasing pressure to meet the changing needs of patients by using data to deliver improved care outcomes. Now more than ever, these organizations need a secure, scalable, and flexible platform to centralize, unite, and share sensitive data. Introducing the Healthcare and Life Sciences Data Cloud. The Healthcare and Life Sciences Data Cloud empowers your organization to mobilize and securely share data to deliver holistic, equitable, and individualized care, and accelerate the discovery, development, and delivery of life-saving medicines and products. The Healthcare and Life Sciences Data Cloud ensures the security and compliance of sensitive data with privacy regulations while providing borderless, near real-time, and governed data access across your organization and with partners, suppliers, and research collaborators. Through the Snowflake Data Marketplace, healthcare and life sciences organizations can manage access to live data and real-time insights and safeguard protected health information while seamlessly accessing third-party data from providers across the industry, allowing your organization to deliver exceptional care outcomes, develop next-generation medicines, and build a healthier future together. Build a healthier future with the Healthcare and Life Sciences Data Cloud. Snowflake.
Hi. Hey, good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Wanted to thank everybody for joining today's webinar, which we're calling Creating Patient 360 Views from Clinical to Operations at Scripps Health. We'll get started in just a minute, but just to kick things up, let me please go over a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, welcome to please ask questions throughout the duration of the webinar. There's a Q&A box in the webinar console, probably on the lower right of your guys' screen. Please submit those through there, and we'll address them either as they come up or we save some time at the end to grab those. And if we don't get to them during the webinar, Victor and I will do our best to grab them, figure out who sent it, and follow up afterwards. You can all learn more about the topic of today's webinar by clicking on the additional content that's available in the resource module of the webinar console. And then just after the session, they'll be presented with a brief survey. We'd love your participation just so that we can continue to provide feedback that's relevant, that's timely, that's informative to help you learn more about Snowflake and what we're doing in the healthcare life sciences ecosystem. And then just lastly, webinar is being recorded. So you'll get a copy of the recording via email, and anyone who did sign up will automatically get that, and glad to share that as well. So with that, let's jump right into the presentation. Give me. Hi guys, so I am Patrick Kovalik, and I am with Snowflake. I'm an industry principal on our healthcare and life sciences team. Forgive me really quick for one technical glitch.
And hey everyone, while he's doing that, my name is Victor. I'm Director of Enterprise Analytics at Scripps Health. Been working here in the EDW for a little over a decade now, and looking forward to chatting today and hearing some questions and hopefully giving you guys some answers.
Thank you, Victor, for that pinch hit. This is why Scripps is so successful, because you recognize when you need to audible and flex, and nothing like a webinar that runs into a quick glitch. And again, yeah, thank you for joining. I appreciate it. I'm excited to keep learning more about your journey and sharing with everybody that joined. So guys, just real quick, I'm just going to go through some basic foundations of Snowflake. Besides learning what Snowflake has done to help Scripps Health, let me just talk about what Snowflake is doing in the healthcare industry as a whole and what we call our Healthcare Life Sciences Data Cloud. We'll also get into then how Scripps is driving those patient 360 use cases and the overall of their whole healthcare ecosystem and what challenges he's faced and what opportunities he's getting. And then just Victor and I will go back and forth, learning about what we're each seeing in the market and where he's having success. And then that's where we welcome your questions. So please pass those in, and we'll go through them. So with that, just everybody give me a quick 5 minutes. I'll talk about, what is Snowflake quickly. I hope you guys all got the chance to join the video. I think the video hit it right on the head. With the constant change and growth and just different disparity of data sources and data sources, healthcare is going through a huge explosion. And this is ultimately the biggest challenge we see, is to really shift operations and delivery of care to be more patient-centric. You've got to find different ways to both ingest, share, collaborate on data sources. And that's where moving to the cloud and moving to Snowflake presents a number of opportunities. I mean, ultimately, the biggest challenge to these 360 views, whether that's on the member or the patient, or on the provider, or on even the employee for internal staff, I mean, ultimately, data is spread across the organization. Organizations can no longer just rely on what's the comfortable data set of their first-party data. For the health plan side, the claims detail, and on the provider side, the clinical data stored in their EHR. Those are just one part of the equation. So to really get beyond just a view and get into closer and closer to that 360 view, collaboration is key. Third-party data is key. Wearables, social determinants of health profiling in that upper corner is probably the most relevant today, of how do I find more data from consumer insights and demographics to profile who is Victor, more than just what happened to Victor when you walked into that, that emergency department, or you had that PCP visit. This is the goal of what we're talking about here. And, building those 360 views is a huge challenge. I think fundamentally what, we see across all the organizations is every organization talks about how they have a very robust view, but no organization really has a full picture of the patient or the member or the provider. What they have is the most complete view they have, limited to what's their first party available. And that's easy to stay there. That's what makes it comfortable. But to really go beyond into like more 360 views and member-centric holistic delivery, finding those new data sources, integrate them, anchoring those records, coordinating through business and IT. And this is what, we've seen, or what Victor will talk about, is success that he's seen at Scripps. But, healthcare wouldn't be healthcare if they had one standard data format or one standard, EHR layout to be able to ingest all that data. And that's what I love most about Victor's story that he'll talk about, is how do you take all these challenges and still keep it secure and still keep it governed, and but still let the business feel engaged as if they're getting their insights. And that's where you get those 360 insights that are so valuable. So with Snowflake, just for those folks that don't know, a cloud-based data platform that really has 4 priority values. The goal here is to have a single integrated source of truth. So any data volume, any data source, any data type, from unstructured and semi-structured data that could come from a clinical record or an HL7 file, to that structured data that you get natively within your own enterprise applications, being able to store those without limits or scale or resource contention. Drive analytics, not just traditional operations and the what happened analytics, but getting into native execution of data science and artificial intelligence, machine learning, application development and execution that can happen natively within Snowflake. And ultimately being able to, what we'll talk about is with our healthcare data cloud, is being able to share in real time and collaborate through any Snowflake environment across clouds. And this is the beauty of how, as you can see, all the different workloads and the challenges of where data sits in healthcare, they're all related to data. So where can Snowflake help to find that? And ultimately, when we talk data collaboration on Snowflake, this is the new evolution. There's a different way to share data. I lived it myself for my 20 years in healthcare of securely emailing data or using secure FTP, and everything is a pipe delimited file or a CSV, and you have to ingest it and move it. What Snowflake allows is the ability to actually share data in real time, without actually moving, without actually copying that data. So I share what I choose to share to the roles that I've exposed and want to share, still governed, still driven from my central master data management governed program. So HIPAA secure, PHI secure. But I've got the ability to create, a visual here. This is the representation of showing how real this is. This is an image of our healthcare data cloud in action. Every blue dot is a Snowflake customer. Every blue line is what we call a stable edge. These are customers who are actively sharing data without moving and without copying today. So, the most probably, relatable data set is, payers and providers share data. Quality and risk adjustments engines, need data. third-party data, to get those, data insights from consumer insights and credit bureaus that can help profile the member, the person, the human. This is the shift and the disruption Snowflake is offering into the healthcare market that's enabled you to be able to share not just data files that are hundreds or thousands of records, but millions of records in real-time secure control. So that's just a background of Snowflake. We can get into some of those questions, but let's jump into, on all those foundations, where has Scripps really accelerated with that? And so with that, Victor, thank you again for jumping on, and I'll let you introduce yourself and kind of go from there. Tell us a little bit about the Scripps story, and then I'll start picking your brain.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick, and hey, everybody. Looking forward to chatting today. So a little bit of background on where I work. Scripps Health is a regional-based hospital system in San Diego County. Mid-sized, I would say, not as big as some of the major healthcare systems out there, but certainly have multiple hospital campuses and lots of clinics around the county. And you all may be familiar with this term hub and spoke or not. I'm going to get into that later. But this kind of analytics model that we're pursuing within our kind of data warehouse and data engineering team, and really our analytics team, is kind of critical. And Snowflake has been kind of the linchpin in allowing us to do that. So I'm going to talk about that quite a bit more later on. But just for some context, we adopted Snowflake in fall of 2019. We came from an on-premise like Hadoop ecosystem. And Snowflake was our very first kind of a voyage into in cloud-based computing and cloud-based data storage. And today we kind of mash up some Azure components with Snowflake. We can get into that as well later on. And then the last thing I'll just point out here is currently today we have more than 50 sources. It's actually closer to 60 now loaded into Snowflake. Not all of them are daily or hourly. Some of them are weekly. Some of them are monthly. Some of them are one time. But we have kind of a metadata framework that we use to quickly get data into Snowflake. And Snowflake was a huge enabler of that. And Patrick and I will probably talk about that a little bit too. But so yeah, we've got all sorts of data coming into Snowflake, all sorts of types of data coming into Snowflake, certainly a ton of JSON, ton of flat files, ton of relational data, XML. I mean, we're consuming pretty much any type of data there is into Snowflake today, and giving our business partners kind of that, lowering the barrier. That's the goal, is lowering the barrier for them to access their data and generate insights out of their data. So we'll certainly get into more, but that's a general overview of who we are and what we do. And these were some challenges that we identified right at the outset of when we adopted Snowflake, and one of the some of the reasons why we transitioned to a Snowflake-based infrastructure kind of as our core piece. It was super resource intensive to manage before. We had to have specialists on the team who could manage the Hadoop environment, or a bunch of SQL Server DBAs or Oracle DBAs or whatever kind of environments you have. Quite a bit of overhead to manage our physical infrastructure at the time. And then the systems, were limited by the capacity that they had. So at peak times, I'm sure everyone's experienced this, but at peak times, 100% capacity, 110% capacity, was tough, especially when, first of the month or last of the month or whatever. So we identified that as like a key issue. Tons of siloed data. We're still fighting this. We'll talk about some of the challenges around the organization with siloed data. We're a lot better place than we were before. But even within our own team, having siloed data, certain use cases were going to our SAP HANA instance, certain use cases were remaining in our SQL servers and databases, certain use cases were coming out of Hadoop, but we didn't have a great way to integrate those things without physical extraction, transformation, and ingestion into another system. Tons of orchestration, tuning, and administration, our data architects and data engineers, and we don't have that many. I didn't put it in the slide before, but we have a team of about 10 people, about 5 data engineers and 5 developers. And so when one of our major analytic products broke, tons of tuning to try to get it performant, or troubleshoot it or whatever, and then tons of effort just to get it into the right place. So lots of work was being done there. Then, of course, redundancy, disaster recovery, all those things when you're on premise is a challenge. You need more physical hardware, and you have to have processes to do backups and stuff like that, and then you need to manage and administer it. And then some of our more modern analytical tool capabilities, even 3 years ago, were looking for cloud native databases. And we weren't able to leverage some of those because of our kind of on-prem infrastructure that we had at the time. So we identified all these things, evaluated a bunch of vendors, and ended up selecting Snowflake. And this is just some of the technical impact. We're going to get into the business impact, I think, a little later. But it allowed us to get all that data from all those places into a single platform fairly easily. And I'll get into the details of why it's easy, but primarily it's easy because we don't do a ton of transformation anymore to get data from a source into Snowflake. We are really focused on maximizing the compute that Snowflake gives us to not have to do a bunch of transformation into the Snowflake platform, just get that data in raw and deal with it kind of up the stack from there. And we do a lot of logical data combination because Snowflake is so powerful and allows us to do that. That reaps a bunch of benefits for us, which we can talk about later. We talked about bad performance before, so Snowflake is the opposite. You can scale it infinitely if you want to. There's a cost incurred when you do that, but you can tweak and find the optimal performance for the analytic product you're looking for, depending on the SLA or who's consuming the data or whatever. So having that scalability or elasticity on our compute was huge for us because now our data volume can increase. Our complexity of what we're building can increase, et cetera, et cetera. Really nice that it's ANSI SQL compliant. A lot of our developers, we have some that develop in SQL and Python and other languages, but everyone's kind of backbone in our group is SQL. So having a platform that they can interact. And then we've got embedded people in our spokes who know some SQL. And so that's enabling for them to come onto a platform that they can interact with and access the data that they need without a whole bunch of training. Security and compliance requirements, that was a big hurdle for us to make sure that Snowflake was compliant. It met all of our InfoSec requirements at the time and still does. So that was really nice because I don't know if anyone else had this issue, but in 2017 and 2018, we were pushing to go, let us get up in Azure. We're a Microsoft shop, so let us get up in Azure. Or, hey, the Snowflake Cloud Data Warehouse looks really interesting. Can we spin this up? And it was always like, well, how secure is it? It's outside of our realm of control, outside of our physical data center. So going through the process with Snowflake to review all of our security and compliance requirements, and of course it checks every box. And so really happy there. And then this is huge for us with a small team. Near zero management when it comes to tuning, performance optimization, those kinds of things. Near zero maybe is even the wrong term. It's zero. We don't do any. Yes, we modify our queries and make them perform better, and we kind of play around with the warehouse sizes and stuff like that. But I wouldn't even call that management of the environment. Key benefit of a SaaS product, and Snowflake is one, is that the management happens on that side. So huge time savings. We're able to redeploy FTEs to do other stuff. Really, really important for us to keep delivering value. So.
Awesome.
Patrick, do you want me to talk about these a little bit, and then we'll get into the questions?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead. And honestly, I love the foundations too of even laying in some of the technical, because that's, like Victor, everything you're talking about. You're a data and a systems ninja to be able to get it all in there. But that's what I love. I think what you're going to get into here is with all that, the offloading of the administration and the mess. What else can you focus on? Here you go. Hit me with these four, and then we can keep talking.
Sure. Yeah. And I highlighted these four. There's obviously plenty to choose from, but I highlighted these four. Supply chain on the left-hand side. So one of our spokes, when you think about the hub being the data warehouse team or the analytics team that kind of sits centrally, our job is really to set the standards and processes around how to deliver data, how to manage data, how to govern data, how to query data, how to create analytics products. But those standards and processes should then enable the people who know the business the best and know their data the best. Because I'm not a supply chain data expert. I don't know their business throughput processes. I don't know their operational workflows. They are. So if I can provision the data for them and enable them to analyze their use cases and produce analytic product with data from multiple sources or disparate sources, that's how we're going to win. And that's how we're going to keep producing value for the org. So this was a big one, getting the supply chain team onto our platform. yeah, we just did a value engineering analysis with them and found that it was a multi-million-dollar savings for the org annually for the work that technically was not possible for them to do when their data was so disparate. And now they have this combination or integration of, third-party supply data, clinical data, and their own internal supply data that they manage. And kind of they're able to figure out where we're going to have shortages, that kind of stuff, order better, all those kinds of things that supply data is. Like I said, I'm not a supply chain expert, but they're killing it on our platform. COVID, I think one of the things that happened with COVID was it drove some groups to utilize our platform who were maybe a bit reluctant to do it before, because those groups really needed an integrated view of what our patients and staff looked like to make sure that we can manage when we had a COVID surge or a staff shortage, which those things tend to happen in tandem. Like as people got sicker in the county, our staff would start calling in sick. So being able to look at, okay, what does our patient volume look like today? What do we think it's going to look like over the next 4 weeks? And also connecting to third-party data, we utilize the Johns Hopkins Secure Share. So we can probably talk about that, Patrick. But COVID was a really huge place for us to utilize that Secure Share data in the marketplace. That open source free data that was published that we could look at and kind of benchmark ourselves against the national and regional averages, those kinds of things, and really try to get a bit predictive with what we thought our patient volume was going to look like. And then we started looking at staff schedules and who was calling in sick and where they were calling in sick from, and outbreaks that staff was having on certain floors and stuff like that. So I think it really kind of brought, our clinical folks, our HR folks together kind of on this platform. They were mostly consumers of the content. They weren't in there really doing the development, but enabling the ability to kind of look at that data side by side and come up with kind of a single output that, hey, we're predicting that over the next 8 weeks, our patient volumes will look like this, and we're going to have a staff shortage. So go and hire more travelers or whatever was really critical and is maybe not as critical today, but those things are still running. And, I think we're prepared for the next time that happens.
I actually love that. Sorry, real quick, I was just gonna say I actually love that reference because it's like I think we're at the point now too where like you can talk about some of the, I call them the silver linings that came out of the the worst last couple of years we've ever had. I mean, it was a pandemic and the hardships across the entire industry were everywhere. But like I love that, like that trigger. I've seen the same thing across the whole industry and my own company before I joined Snowflake. Like organizations had to mobilize fast and find more data to help those patients that were critical and to take other data sets like your staffing insights and actually bring the people to the data. So like in an old world, every man for himself, every team would have been running a spreadsheet and figuring out how do they handle their departments. I do love this one because I think this is the foundation for almost everybody, I assume, that's on the call as well. Like what was that? So like if you look back on your own journey, what was your trigger for what made you really commit to the cloud or to data centralization and democratization? And I don't know, you made me smile when you kind of told that, because I think a lot of the things that I've learned about what you talked about Scripps, sort of your COVID management proved that you could bring different people together into Snowflake, and all it really meant was faster data ingestion and faster time to results. So I love that example.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think you can categorize these things. I think the first one is ease of integration of disparate data to enable the business. The second one is kind of forcing business groups to come to, some external event kind of forcing business groups to come together. And then luckily you're prepared and have the platform to deliver on that use case. That's really how I see our job is my job, especially as director of the department, is like looking across the landscape and trying to figure out what use cases are here, what use cases are coming, and how is our architecture prepared for that? And are we future-proofed? And this one was, no one expected COVID to happen, but like bringing those groups together, whereas if they didn't have the technology to do so, they would have been forced to do it in some other way. The third one I categorize as performance improvement. We brought the accounts receivable team onto our platform because they were just getting the transaction level data they were trying to process was so voluminous that their systems that they had been relying on for a while were no longer performing the way that they needed. So bringing them onto our platform, being able to scale, and now they can compute the data that they require at the granularity that they require, which is really, really small level of granularity at the charge level. So they're able to now continue and do the analysis that they were like literally stopped on our platform. So that's really nice. And then the fourth category is really application development on the platform. So we have an application development group at Scripps. They build a lot of our front-facing patient applications, also some of our front-facing websites and stuff like that. And they've transitioned to using Snowflake as kind of their singular backend versus a bunch of like disparate siloed SQL databases with data from kind of all over the place. So now they can build more integrated solutions because they have the ability to build on a platform that has all of that data, and it's performant enough for them to continue to build on. So these are 4 use cases. There's plenty more, but these are 4 ones that without Snowflake, I don't know if we would have been able to achieve in the same way.
Awesome. I love them. Every time I hear another tidbit about Scripps, I just smile. I think it's great context. I mean, there's so much extensive data ingestion strategies you have that have become, common practice for you guys. What I liked about this too is like, again, sometimes I end up, crossing so many boundaries on healthcare. Like when organizations join a call like this, or they ask about 360 views, they're really only thinking like clinical only. How do I get more clinical, either deeper for what happened or broader for like what else? I like that you're kind of bringing in the reminder that like 360 still touches so much, so many other aspects beyond just clinical. So I mean, that's just great. Because again, your whole ecosystem of what Scripps has is in play, and it just builds, better visibility for all your departments. So I think that's great. I was curious. Clinical is still your core bread and butter, so yeah, go ahead. Tell me about how, though, you do still kind of shift back into, maybe interoperability or some of the exchanges of that clinical data. I know maybe the one use case you didn't put on there, I know you guys have a big research team. Has that been able to mature as well, with data accessibility?
Yeah, I think, clinical data at the end of the day, I think is our, certainly our highest volume of data and probably our most valuable data. And it's where we want to probably drive the biggest impact. Like, it's great to, help save the organization money or increase, operational throughput or whatever. But at the end of the day, if we're able to get insights out of our platform that affect patient care, that's most near and dear to my heart. But extending out how we leverage our clinical data. Yeah, we have a partnership. So they're called Scripps Research. They're technically a separate entity, but we have a partnership with them to share and collaborate on Scripps data. So they have the same kind of permissions that a Scripps employee would have. So having this kind of environment where, research doesn't just want Scripps clinical data. They might want benchmarked national clinical data. Mm-hmm. They might want random sample data. They might want third-party data, whatever. And so bringing them onto our platform and allowing them to access all that data and helping them build either standard kind of research data models that their applications consume, or help them chase down, ad hoc one-time analysis or repeat analysis, has been hugely enabling to them. Because what we found on the Scripps research side is they're typically not technologists. They're typically, statisticians and PhDs in research. And so again, it's just an extension of the same thing. Like, they know exactly what they want to do. They pretty much know how to do it. We just have to give them the tools and processes to enable them. And we can talk about some of the internal benefits that brings for us, like from a data governance perspective. But that's really what we're trying to do, because, we're in a cost-conscious environment. I don't think our team is going to double in size anytime soon. So we have to figure out a way to outsource the capabilities that we have around the organization. And Snowflake for us has been the way that we've been doing that, and setting up our Snowflake kind of platform structure to bring those groups on, help them understand where their data is, help them get their data in there, and then kind of partner with them and work with them as they kind of build and generate analytic product. That's, I think, how we're just going to get the most value for the business versus a more centralized model of us kind of building everything.
So just you hinted at it real quick there, but so tell me how, like, again, you have so many, and you said it in your intro, you have 50, upwards of 60 data sources, and you talked about how they're both very sensitive, being clinical, and then systems data. How do you talk to me a little bit about your governance strategy? What do you kind of do? What have you learned that's worked well? Like, is it from role-based access to just kind of who can access what, or how do you protect that data? Like, the governance one, I'm sure is probably why a lot of people joined a call like this, to figure out how do you protect it all?
Yeah, I think when you're trying to design how to manage your data, it's certainly helpful, first of all, to kind of get it into a single place, where it's transparent, where it is, where it came from. Snowflake has really nice technical metadata about who's accessing it and all that kind of stuff. I think once you kind of can see the data across the landscape, you can start having conversations with the business about data ownership, data literacy, all those kinds of things. And then if it's black box, if it's somewhere else, it's a lot harder to have those conversations. And they kind of go in tandem with building a strong bench of data owners too. Like, we've kind of fought over the years when we didn't have the technology before, finance or whatever would like manage their own data in some silo, and they'd say, no, I own this data. Like, you can't have it. And I'd say, well, we're the enterprise data warehouse. Like, my one and only job is to like bring data in centrally. So we have to figure out how to have this conversation. But it's kind of weird, like the enablement that Snowflake helps create kind of invites people to come onto the platform. And it's like, look, your finance data is here, but there's also, some third-party data that we're able to ingest really quick. And also you can access our EHR data if you need to and build some sort of kind of integrated model. And so that brings them onto the platform. And then we start saying, hey, you're a data owner, you own this. Let's build some policies around this data and make sure that we know. It's like inviting them to the dinner party, and then you can have the conversation. But if they don't show up to your party, you can't really have the conversation. So it's super enabling for our data governance team, also very small, and also trying to build grassroots kind of, data evangelism around how important it is and how valuable it is. When you kind of get it all into that place and you're able to look at it and see, and you're able to quickly see who has access to the data right now, and does this need to be modified or changed, and how can we manage this policy, and do you want to own this policy? Those kinds of things, Snowflake has been really enabling for us.
I love that, and that actually dovetails on one of the questions that just came in is, people are always curious, how do you have more success? And I think you just nailed on that. Your hub and spoke, like the spokes are actual, really engaged. Like, you're not making a black box, a wall where you have to ask for permission and knock on that door. Not only are they invited to the dinner party, but it's a potluck. Come and enjoy and participate, and then they'll get more value and they keep coming back. I mean, I just think that's fantastic. The way that, it's almost like by proving that you can get there, and then you guys are able to vet it and bless it and validate it as source of truth, and you've been able to do the cleansing and the anchoring to, across all these different data sources. You're able to match it as to what member are we talking, what patient are we talking about, or what system are we talking about. And I assume, have you found that's almost like that hub and spoke model has almost made them like push more to you because they see the success and they're like, hey, if we go on our own, like, we're going to hit a wall. But if I work with Victor and my team, we're going to get more and more value. And then, that's how you jump to 60 data sources. I think that's brilliant.
Right. Yeah. It starts to snowball. So, and then we have to be really good about promoting the success and the partnership. So when we have really good success with a couple of these business units, it's making sure that we understand what that success is, trying to quantify it if we can. And then, letting the other groups around the organization know that they can come join the party. And one thing that has been a bit of a challenge for us, or I guess an opportunity, is how do you kind of enable that model of these groups coming onto our platform with kind of the minimum effort required to make sure that they're doing things the right way and following the right processes. Like I said, we have a small team. So when we invite the supply chain team or the marketing team or the HR team or the horizontal finance team onto our platform and say, we have this process where we kind of build out a sandbox environment for them where they kind of manage it and realistically own it. Like, it's their kind of dev playground place, and we give them access to the data that they're allowed to have access to and whatever. How do we kind of manage it from that point forward to make sure that we're helping them follow our standards and processes when it comes to best practice? How do we make sure that they're getting the data from the right place when they do start to build analytics products? How do we review what they've developed and built and make sure that it aligns with how we want to do things in the hub? And then how do we create a kind of seamless deployment process to get their product out to the people that they need to get it out to, while not having to wait for, a super centralized process to do deployment? So that's our opportunity kind of this year is, and some of our lessons learned is like tweaking the process to make sure that we're out of their way and we're really in the provisioning business more than anything. But that as they start to develop and use the tool and their things get more complex, what kind of oversight do we have over that to make sure that they're not, using more credits than they should, or not building things from the wrong place that they should. So I think the solution to that this year is probably working on more of a partnership approach. Like, I'm not going to be able to babysit them. My data engineers are not going to be able to babysit them, but it's more about maybe some better training up front. And then as we go, more feedback back and forth to make sure that they're doing things the right way in the first couple months, and then maybe kind of letting the reins off a little bit and letting them go. So that's one of the opportunities we certainly have as we, our goal for FY23, which just started here in the month of October, is self-service adoption. Like, how can we further enable the business? We had this legacy model, and this is before Snowflake, we had this legacy model like report requests or analytics requests that go into a queue, and we only have so many developers and so much bandwidth and so much time, and so a lot of them stay there for a month or 3 months or 6 months or whatever. And a significant portion of these requests are like, if I just had access to my data, from 3 sources, and I had a little bit of help to kind of combine these things together and generate some output, I wouldn't have to submit a request. So the release valve for this long list of report requests is enabling people to do the job that they were hired to do, and giving them, helping them with either the technical competency or just the tools and the processes to do their work. So that's the plan.
It's fantastic. This again, if I'm coming in from what is the rest of the industry facing as a challenge, you're hitting it head on, because it's like, you've already mentioned, whether you even kind of knew it or not, you have your claims data, your EHR data, supply chain, you mentioned HR, finance. These are all teams that are totally, or natively disconnected and totally different types of data, and you're bringing them together into one spot. So, it is great. So do you have you set anything up where they, the business is almost empowered to almost, be part of that governance program to sign off on data sets as you get a new source? Do you just load it and then kind of trust them to vet it? How do you do that with any of those 60 data sets that you have? Walk me through maybe what's the process when you loaded the 58th one? How do you work with them to make sure that, it's been loaded correctly? As I love what I like about it is you guys kind of stay your lane, they stay theirs, but totally symbiotic. How do you use them to sort of validate that it has been loaded and anchored to the rest of your operational set appropriately?
Yeah, that's a good question. And of course, it depends on the use case. One of our enablement features that we've really leveraged Snowflake for, this is a little bit technical, and I mentioned it before, but we do almost zero transformation from the source into our kind of raw Snowflake area. So the data, there's no transformation in the pipeline typically, unless we have to, or we have to add some metadata on the end or whatever. But typically, it should look exactly like it does in the source. So when we get a request for even a new table within a source or a new source completely, if it's from a group that we're already working with and already partnering with, the checks are faster to say, hey, this analyst that's requesting this, are we allowed to pull it in? Is there any sort of PHI we should be concerned about? We have all sorts of dynamic data masking policies, another really cool Snowflake feature to mask data dependent on the role that you're logged in as. So does any of this data need any sort of masking applied on it, or should just be maybe not loaded at all? We have some super, super highly sensitive data that sometimes maybe we just don't load unless we really need to for some use case. So we have those conversations, and then, those checks are pretty quick. If it's a new group, that obviously takes a little bit longer to understand, who is the owner of this piece of data, making sure we have their sign off. If it's a new source, obviously we need some sort of credential to get after that data, whether it's an API or a relational data source or whatever. So that process is just kind of inherent, requesting those permissions to do that, but making sure that they understand the kind of data that we're bringing in, and that we're loading into kind of our central data repository. And once it's in, the evaluation starts with the analyst who's doing the work, making sure the data, our loads do basic data quality stuff like row count matching and things like that, but it's really up to the analyst to make sure that the data is accurate and correct. Okay. And then when they start to build things in their kind of sandbox, they can kind of do what they want. But when they're ready to say, hey, this is a production ready asset, or I want to push this up the stack, we kind of evaluate it and say, okay, like what's derived here, or what's net new from a piece of data that, you know, maybe combining two pieces together or aggregating or something, and then making sure that that's something new, that we kind of bake that into our documentation process. We have a pretty cool data cataloging tool that captures a lot of the technical metadata out of Snowflake automatically, but we want to enrich that with the business metadata. So documenting, you know, what is this metric that they just built? What does it do? Where does the data come from? And then making sure that that same person who manages that data takes ownership of that metric and says, is this calculating correct? You know, length of stay or whatever the metric might be. And then that kind of gets stamped and approved, and then we're able to kind of push it up the stack. So in summary, they've kind of got this development environment where they're, you know, able to access the portions of the raw data that they have access to. Almost everyone in our Snowflake environment develops stuff logically, at least at first. We have very little physical data transformation happening, just because even at small warehouse sizes, the compute certainly works for us until you get into really voluminous data. And then our last job as kind of the hub is to evaluate what they're building and see if it makes sense to add to one of our kind of growing master models that we're building. We certainly don't want a whole lot of one-off kind of analytics solutions. Ideally, we loop back around and kind of see where these fit, and maybe we can extend a couple of the models that we already have, or maybe start a new one, you know, who knows. But it's kind of a prototype, iterative loop kind of development process with some of those data governance components kind of baked in as we go. And it's not perfect. We don't do it exactly right every time. Like, I'm not trying to brag, but the process has enabled us with a small team to consistently generate accurate analytics products by leveraging the people who know the data the best. So.
Yeah. No, I'm smiling because I'm kind of like, keep bragging, because like every time, like I got a little OneNote or a little yellow pad I'm keeping. Like, you have such a small team for how much you're taking in. Like, this is amazing. Because I was just going to ask you, I was like, you know, whether it's, you know, contextual, or you've just heard it from those business partners, or maybe you measured it. I mean, it sounds like you also have just incredibly improved gain on the timing and the speed, like, you know, to actually deliver these insights, or, you know, the data into an analytical capacity. Is that, you know, I assume you've seen that. Is that, you talk me through, you know, versus maybe 3 or 4 years ago, how much faster is it now to actually engage with your business teams and let them see that data?
Yeah, I think speed to value for us is like a pretty critical metric, and how we can increase the speed to value. And part of that is this ETL or EL framework that we have to get data in quickly. And then part of that is Snowflake allowing you to not have to worry about transforming data, at least at the outset, and being able to build pretty complex things on top of that data and doing all that stuff logically. So when the requirement changes, or you're troubleshooting a piece of bad data or whatever, you don't have to go, you know, talk about 4 years ago. Let's see, we had a persistent stage area in SQL Server. We had a data warehouse layer in SQL Server. We had an ODS that was kind of operating off the side. We had physical data marts that we constructed, and then we had things built on top of those data marts that were, you know, going to the consumers. And so when they saw a piece of bad data, how long would it take us to figure out where that data broke down, or at which hop it got screwed up? I mean, I don't know, days. And now in our kind of Snowflake ecosystem that we've built, it's pretty much immediate. So we're able to, we've transitioned down from weeks to hours to load data into the environment, and we've transitioned down from days to minutes to figure out when something's wrong and make a change and redeploy. I mean, it's super quick. Of course, we have managed, you know, CI and CD processes to manage the code, but like, I guess it takes time for those things to run. But super fast and much faster, and Snowflake was certainly an enabler there.
That's awesome, and it just builds trust too, you know, and that's what keeps them coming back. So just curious, like when, how have you guys evolved into, like, a lot of this sharing is kind of like for internal operations to build the different, you know, views. What do you guys consider when you do need to share data out? You know, are you are you moving into some of the more standardized formats with HL7, Fire, or even exchanges with different health plans that you engage with? Talk to me about that. What best practices do you have? It's almost like you've got a book you could write on how to share data and bring your internal folks to your data. What do you do when you think beyond the Scripps wall? Victor, how do you kind of govern that to where they're a little less controllable? What are you guys doing there?
Yeah, we're trying to bring those things in. So historically, the payer relations team has sent and received data back from payers, and the team over here has interacted with their kind of external partners. Marketing team has sent data back and forth with Salesforce or whoever. We're trying to bring all that stuff in too. So we have some templates today that generate data in standard formats. We're working on a Fire one right now. And actually, we're an Epic customer, and Epic has the ability to deliver data out of Epic in Fire format. But the benefit of doing it with us and why we're trying to bring it into our group is obviously we have more than just our EHR data in our environment. So, if anybody, payer, network member, or whatever wants data in that format, we've got a template kind of ready to go. And Snowflake enables us to do that. So, that's another thing kind of on our list this year is expanding our ability to deliver data in these standard formats via templates, where we just kind of plug in kind of the elements that are required and then deliver it. And that's a huge opportunity because probably a lot of waste in the business doing that today out of their systems. So,
yeah. Question kind of came in. I'm gonna retranslate it. You talk again. I keep kind of referencing these potentially 50 to 60 data sources. Walk me through the journey of Scripps. Like what happened when it was when it started at zero? Like how many are you adding then? Any best practices on how you've kind of gone through your roadmap to migrate all that in, or maybe even in the first wave, how many were there? When the Snowflake foundation for Scripps started. Walk me through that.
Yeah, good question. And it was kind of a long journey for us. I think even prior to when we had Snowflake, I think we were really getting we had a homegrown really data movement process that one of our data architects built. That was like a Java-based program. We ended up kind of putting it in Data Factory as kind of a wrapper. We use Azure Data Factory to move data around. But the critical thing, kind of the light bulb for us, was to templatize stuff and try to make it as dynamic as possible. And so the big kind of light bulb for us was, can we use metadata as kind of this framework to, just kind of give it, the source type you want, the schema, database table and schema that you want, some of the other attributes you care about. And the pipeline kind of inherently knows and reads from that metadata and then dynamically goes and gets the data. So once we had that up and running, and it's just literally a table that stores all that metadata. And if you want to add an object to load, you just add a row to the table and kick off the pipeline. As fast as I said it is as fast as it goes now. So it took a while to get there for us. And a lot of ETL products today can do that, like out of box, especially if you want to follow our strategy of data replication, right? We're not really doing ETL, we're doing data replication into the environment. So I know a lot of those products today are like point and click, and you can replicate a table in the Snowflake. So I may suggest that and not having a homegrown product, but we're really happy with ours, and it works and it's cheap. But that's huge because once that framework is set up and we've kind of slowly expanded the types of templates, like, we built a JSON template and we built a XML template and we built SQL and Oracle and other types of sources templates, flat file template, CSV template, whatever. Once we have those templates going, then it's just about adding the metadata that you care about and kicking off the pipeline to load. So, the first, 5 sources took a while. And now it's very simple to add. We're going to do one this week, another web API source that we're going to hit. And it'll take our developer, a couple hours to pull the data in and have it ready for the business to look at. So huge win for us, letting the data pipelines do all the work.
I think it's great. And then again, you keep I keep trying to think of all these sound bites I'm going to steal from you because that's such a great practice. Templates. First one is the effort, but then you can move quickly. And because everybody is talking about how do I get closer and closer to a 360, like another source. Great practice. You're like templatize it, keep it, load it raw, figure out listen to the business on how they're going to use it, so that you're not kind of cross pollinating strategies. I mean, it's fantastic. So where do you guys
one thing
go?
to mention,
Oh, go ahead.
Just one more thing to mention on that. When you talk about loading raw, Snowflake's been hugely enabling when you talk about loading semi-structured data and the ability to parse with a function. Before loading various types of semi-structured data, parsing is challenging. And now we're even able to get more complex with some of the other data formats that are more difficult to parse traditionally, and be able to build things that can parse those out pretty quickly too. So that's huge when you can just load data into a variant column and then parse it immediately, and make what was JSON or XML or whatever like immediately readable to your customers. That's critical.
Humor me maybe for a couple of the customers that might be on this call who aren't that technical. Tell me that in English. What does that mean of using a function to take something that's unstructured and make it usable? Give me a for instance.
Yeah, so when I say usable, I mean queryable via SQL. So rows and columns like a table. So Snowflake has the ability to read from pretty much any format through the function that you use and kind of parse that data out from a array structure or a tree structure, depending on the data format, to a relational structure, which means you can query it. So you're able to query, JSON as an example directly in Snowflake, because Snowflake will do the parsing for you. So when you talk about speed to value and what we had to do before to parse that data out and get it into a SQL readable format or a relational format, that's really helpful. And now we don't even have to take it out of its raw format. Like we don't even have to do physical data transformation. We can just query the JSON directly. So super powerful for us, especially as our sources inch and inch more towards that type of semi-structured format. I think our relational sources are what they are. We know them. We've got some on-premise SQL Server and Oracle stuff. I don't think we're going to get any more. And so more and more it's going to go towards which new cloud vendor did we spin up and how can we hit their API and pull that data out, and then how can we get that data in the hands of the business the quickest.
So what I'm hearing from maybe the business folks who are on the call and they didn't bring their technical resource with them, when you get say like an HL7 file or a Fire file that comes in those JSON formats that are really tough to read, you don't have to spend the hours and the bandwidth to deconstruct them, load them, so and then they can be pushed out and then reportable. You could actually pull out, a member ID or a key clinical element, from that raw file and act on it quickly. Well, then the rest of the loading might take place afterwards. That's kind of how I sort of butcher your translation, but it means the people who want the data that say, hey, here's an HLC, here's a real admission. Let me act on this right now. I can't wait, a day or two for you to load it and then tell me what happened. You're able to get to it quickly, for what you need. That's awesome. So just curious, like with all this and the foundation is fantastic. What else? What innovations? What projects? Where's Scripps going next? What does 2023 look like for? You've probably built up a ton of enthusiasm with your business teams. What are they asking for next, or where do you want to drive your team?
Yeah, I think more groups on our platform, enabling self-service to kind of get the pressure off some of our developers, because our developers are expensive and our data engineers are expensive. They should be working on highly complex, high integrated, high ROI use cases. Not to mention some of the stuff we want to do with machine learning and leveraging Snowpark. So I think that's maybe our biggest focus is making sure that we can be successful rolling more and more groups onto our platform. But Snowpark, I think, is going to be big for us too as a technical internal team. So new feature for us, just got enabled on our production environment, but allows you to execute Python against your Snowflake data. So previously we had to go external to Snowflake to do that type of data processing and then bring that data back into Snowflake. So I think Snowpark will kind of flatten out our architecture a little bit, make it a little bit simpler, and allow our data science teams to play more in our platform and generate insights, without having to move the data around a bunch. So our goal with a small team is minimum data movement, minimum data transformation, you know what I mean? And outsource things to the business wherever they have the capabilities to do so. And not every business unit has that capability. They don't, right? So it's kind of a spectrum. We used to use this analogy of Home Depot. Like Home Depot has like experts. So if you go in Home Depot and you want to build a shed or something, you can go to the expert and they'll tell you how to do it. Or you can buy a prefabbed thing and just drop it in your backyard. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you're a general contractor and you say, just give me the wood and the nails and the glue and whatever, and I'll build it myself, Like we want to be able to offer that service too. So at every stage in the spectrum, we want to be able to partner with our business units and help them deliver. So that's our goal for this year, is identifying more of those groups, identifying their data, bringing it into our big kind of data meshy, data lakey kind of place, which allows us then to generate insights with other groups who didn't even know that they needed that data, but now it's there, and so they can add that to their analyses too. So it's like this very everybody wins kind of mentality.
Yeah. Who knew, Victor, that dinner parties and backyard tool sheds could basically drive better insights on the patient population you guys serve? I love it.
I can't take credit for the Home Depot one. That was my previous boss, but we really like that analogy. So.
It makes sense. And again, just like the same way as you're taking something complicated as like 60 different data sources, types, formats, and you present it to your business in a way it's explainable. Your Home Depot example, your dinner party example, again, that's the battle. Is how do you bring these two teams together? I'm I'm watching the clock, and there's a couple more questions in there. I'll just hit. Somebody asked, I think it was kind of back to that. You started talking about the roadmap of how you pulled all your data in to start. Question was asked of when you were implementing Snowflake at Scripps, how much Snowflake, I assume they mean Snowflake resources or professional services was involved on a day-to-day management of the environment.
Yeah.
And then I think the second part of that question kind of goes back to your opening message of, what do you do to manage versus, the zero maintenance versus low. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, good question. So Snowflake at the outset, really committed to helping us understand the value that we were going to be getting. I think that was critical, because we weren't just having conversations about Snowflake, we were having conversations about the cloud in general. And so Snowflake was very good about helping us, very thorough about helping us understand the value that we were going to add to the organization by doing this. So, but as far as implementation, not involved pretty much at all unless we need it. We do have a systems engineer that we can contact, or a support team that we can contact. But really, we've never had to ask Snowflake about performance. We've never had to ask them about, why things are slower today than they were yesterday. We haven't even had to ask them about an outage, I don't think, in 3 years. So not involved at all unless you want them to be, which I think is handy, but also very responsive if you need. And so we talked about Snowpark. So Snowpark, we're turning on. We don't really know much about it. We're trying to learn about it. So Snowflake offered their time weekly to teach us about the features of Snowpark, help us set up our first model in our environment using Snowpark, help us set up the databases and the data movement processes that you need to do that, and the functions. And so they can be as involved or not involved as you want, but for us, it was really more hands off and just when we needed it.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Well, I could have gotten in a few more questions, and then a couple more flowed in, but listen, I'm looking at the clock, and sorry we have to end, but I mean, Victor, you tell such a great story. I love the success of Scripps and how much you're using Snowflake in, I wouldn't call them but just different ways. Like just, you're embracing the ability to take in any data source, any different format, to build a better story with your business. And again, I can't say that enough. I love how I'm in so many conversations, and it's always IT does this, business then receives, and you are really symbiotic. And I think that's where it comes in with success. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Anything else you want to add before I wrap us up?
No, thanks for the chat. This was good. We're definitely not there where we want to be, but we're moving towards it.
It's always a journey. It's just like trying to complete a picture of Patrick the human or Victor the human. The 360 view never ends. Same thing with your journey with data and healthcare. Completely relatable. Cool. Well, with that, everybody, thanks also for attending. To the attendees. As a reminder, if you enjoyed the content, or there's additional content in the webinar console links. If we missed any questions, I think I tried to get to all of them, but we'll follow up, or if there's any, send them to myself, or Victor will take a question or two too if you need to send them directly. And as a reminder, everyone will get a link to the recording tomorrow, and you can share that when you exit. There'll also be a brief survey, and we'd love your feedback. Okay. Thank you again, and for learning a little bit about Snowflake and our kind of endeavors within the Healthcare Life Sciences Data Cloud and the journey that Scripps Health has been going through. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.